It's time to get ready for week 9 of the fantasy football season. So which players should you be looking at on the waiver wire? Let's find out. Welcome back, Fantasy Endgame community. I'm Pierre, here to help you again with some more waiver wire options and injury news following week 8. And happy Halloween. Let's see if there's anything to be scared of as far as the injuries from this last weekend. Thankfully, it was a relatively injury-free day, and a lot of points scored. Is one of those weeks that you love for fantasy football, but there is one big notable injury that is worth monitoring, and that is Cooper Kupp, last year's fantasy MVP and Super Bowl. But what is the deal with him? Well, he had his ankle rolled up at the very end of the game in the fourth quarter of a loss, and so Sean McVay, you know what, he's kicking himself. Yeah, we'd like to kick him too for keeping Cooper Kupp in there on meaningless play. But anyways, Kupp had his ankle rolled, and the good news is that it doesn't sound like it's major. He himself said it sounds like he dodged a bullet. All right, so that means he says he feels good. Maybe nothing like a high ankle sprain, nothing serious. Will it keep him out of week 9? Well, it's too early to say because you know this team, you never know how things go with the Rams these days. They might keep him out just to keep him fresh, and it might be something that does require rest. We'll find out over the next few days, so just be prepared to pivot. You know what? It's not like there's so many great options in that Rams offense. He's pretty much it. He's the only one who's been even worth starting, but there might be a guy that is at least worth adding if Kupp misses time. We'll talk about him in a minute. Only a couple of other minor injury updates. Devontae Parker for the Patriots did leave with a knee injury. We'll see what happens with him. It's not like he's been fantasy relevant, but if he is absent, you know, going forward, then that might give at least a little bit more interest to a guy like Tyquan Thornton, you know, as a deep threat, because that's pretty much all Parker was serving at, was that deep threat role. And then you have Irv Smith, tight end for the Vikings. Looked like he was in a great spot this week, but he did also leave with an ankle injury. MRI is coming on Monday, so we'll see what happens with him. All right, let's get to the top waiver wire picks heading into week 9. Well, not a lot of injuries means not a lot of guys to replace, unlike last week, which is a good thing. But also means not a lot of great options that are jumping to the forefront. And you look, let me say that I'm not going to talk about Deontay Foreman in Carolina because I talked about him last week. Look, if you didn't add him last week, your window is either closed or it's about to close. Now you're going to have to bid heavily to get him, which is why I talked about him last week. So here's the thing. With Foreman, yeah, if he's out there, pick him up. But also, you're going to have to temper your expectations because, yeah, he scored 3 times. He smashed against Atlanta because it's Atlanta. Next week on the road against Cincinnati, a much better team and run defense. I don't expect him to have quite that same kind of success, especially if Chuba Hubbard plays, because remember, Foreman pretty much had the backfield to himself. But again, Foreman, a guy you should have added already. Now, I'll start with a guy who, well, he has been added in a lot of leagues, but in some he had been dropped. He's just kind of a borderline handcuff, but maybe he's a handcuff. I don't know. Khalil Herbert is who I'm talking about. He's a guy who wasn't really splitting time with Montgomery until last week, and now it looks like this is suddenly a timeshare. All right, Khalil Herbert had played when David Montgomery was out and did really well, but then as soon as Monty came back, he was the backup and only getting a few carries. But since the bye week, the Bears have looked at things differently. Number one, this backfield is now split. Number two, they're actually passing the ball sometimes. So it's working because they're scoring points. So whatever they figured out, it worked. Now, Herbert has had a lot of success on the ground. He's been better as a pure rusher than David Montgomery. So, and he's been dropped in a lot of leagues or just isn't, out there because we didn't know what to get from him. With Montgomery healthy, he wasn't someone you could put in your lineup faithfully. But even with Monty healthy, in really against a tough Dallas defense on the road and in a game where it was back and forth, it wasn't necessarily positive game script for the Bears all game. He got 99 yards and a touchdown, and that was only on 16 carries. Khalil Herbert can break those big runs. He will get those goal line touches. That's valuable, and especially now that this is kind of like the Patriots, almost 50-50. What Khalil Herbert will not do, and I will tell you this because it remains true, he will not catch passes, period. You won't even get targeted really hardly at all. That's the problem, is that the floor is low. Without a touchdown, without those big gains, you could be left with, well, not very much. But in good matchups, Khalil Herbert always has that upside. And now it looks like he has standalone value, even aside from David Montgomery's health. He's available in about a third of all fantasy leagues, according to Yahoo rostered rates. So there's a good chance he's out there. Go ahead and scoop him up. Another guy I'm not going to talk about is Josh Palmer, because I talked about him last week too on my early waiver wire players to stash. Because looking ahead, well, now the Chargers are done with their bye week. They're going to be playing Atlanta, and it's going to be without Mike Williams, who's going to miss a few weeks with that high ankle injury. So you're going to see Palmer a lot more involved. He's definitely somebody to grab. But I'm actually going to go and talk about Gerald Everett, because Gerald Everett has been a solid tight end pretty much throughout the season, and he's going to be involved again without Mike Williams. So I think that he's probably more valuable, because at that tight end position, he's going to be more important, especially this coming week. There's 6 teams on bye, so there's a good chance you might need to fill in somewhere for tight end. Gerald Everett right now is the tight end number 12 in terms of PPR scoring on the season. But look, out of all those guys who are above him, 2 of them are on bye this coming week. One of them is hurt, and one of them is Taysom Hill, who, let's just face it, he got most of his points in that one game, right? So Gerald Everett has been really one of the most dependable tight end options out there. He's a guy that not only has a great matchup and in a great spot this week, he's somebody you could probably fill in at the tight end position for the rest of this season, unless you happen to have one of those top few tight ends. If so, then don't worry about it. Don't pick up Gerald Everett, maybe stash Palmer, but I really like Gerald Everett as a starter this week, and he's a great rest of season hold. All right, now on to the Cooper Kupp news. Well, if he does miss, will we see a lot of Allen Robinson? I would think so. I would hope so, because who else are they going to throw to? Look, Van Jefferson, I also mentioned last week on that stash, the early waiver wire ads, somebody to stash and to keep on your bench. Hopefully you didn't start him this past week, because he got 0 catches. Maybe he'll be more involved. He'll have to be involved, at least if Cooper Kupp misses. But look, Allen Robinson, even with Kupp on the field in the last 2 games, you might not even realize this, he's had 5 catches in back-to-back games. That's nothing crazy, right? It's not great, but he's gotten double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues for 2 straight games. I mean, that's something. And then if Kupp misses, all of a sudden you look at Allen Robinson, you think maybe you have to start him. I mean, at the very least, if he's out there, this is the time to add him. We may not know about Kupp's injury status until after Tuesday, when a lot of waivers run. And so this is the time to grab Robinson if he was dropped. And then, believe it or not, we're going to go back to Chicago for another option. Darnell Mooney, also a guy that was drafted almost everywhere before the season and was dropped in a lot of places after the first few weeks. But things have changed. I already mentioned that the Bears are now actually passing the ball, and you may not realize because you either didn't have Mooney or you dropped him or you benched him. But now it's 5 straight games that Mooney has gone at least over 50 yards. That means he actually has a floor, which is exactly what we thought he wouldn't have. But he's had this floor. Look, he's gotten some big plays down the field. Could be doing better. Obviously, the touchdowns haven't been coming. There's that one he almost maybe kind of should have had last week. This week it was Cole Kmet's turn, because, he was due for past 2 years to score a touchdown. Mooney will get there, and I do like the fact that he is pretty much the best option in town. So the Bears are now actually spreading out a little bit. Fields is looking a little bit better. Mooney has shown some consistency. I'm not going to say that I feel great about starting him each and every week, but Mooney is definitely somebody that you could have with upside on your bench. And then let's get a little deeper. Look, if you're in one of these deep leagues, you want to take a shot on a guy that could help you during a heavy bye week. How about Damiere Byrd, the veteran who is playing now for Atlanta? So this is a guy who really wasn't on the radar at all the first few weeks, but now he's gone back-to-back weeks with a big catch for a touchdown. Last week, it was a 75-yard score. That was his only catch, but it was a big one. This week, he had a 47-yard touchdown plus a couple of other catches. So is Byrd slowly working his way into the mix in this Atlanta passing game? It looks like it. This is a guy who has had success in the past. He's never put together a strong season to make him fantasy relevant, but he has in the past put together some strong games. So I do like the fact that he's now kind of a hot hand there. We know he's got some speed. And facing the Chargers this coming week, you know that Atlanta will probably have to pass quite a bit. They already lost J.C. Jackson, that top corner, for the season. Chargers haven't done great against the pass. Atlanta has put up points, if nothing else. I mean, they give up points, but they're putting up points. So there's more of a flyer pick here, but Damiere Byrd, if he's going to make those big plays consistently, why not? He was targeted the second most times out of the whole team besides Kyle Pitts. That's right, Kyle Pitts, in week 8. So you know what? Give Byrd a shot. He's a high-end streamer in my opinion. And then finally, I do have to mention Kadarius Toney. So we talked about him quite a bit on our live shows. Regardless of what you think of Kadarius Toney, the fact that he's on the Chiefs, yes, that should give you some interest. Look, I personally don't expect much from him this season, but if you have room at the end of your bench, if there's a guy that you can drop or you're just going to drop anyways and you want to take a flyer, take a chance. Late in the season, he does something. Maybe he gives you a big play, a big game. You know what? Why not? I'm not running out to grab Kadarius Toney, but I don't blame you if you do because we know that he is a guy, once the ball is in his hands, he's immensely talented, quick, can evade tacklers. The problem is just getting on the field in the first place and then, of course, getting those targets because now he's part of a very crowded Chiefs receiver room, but obviously the Chiefs traded for him for a reason. They see something in him. Andy Reid, you know if somebody can make you fantasy relevant, it is Andy Reid. So again, only if you're not dropping somebody of value. If you want to take a flyer, try Kadarius Toney. All right, that does it for the Week 9 edition of Waiver Wire Pickups. Don't forget all the help that you need for Week 9 is in our playlist with start, sit, trade, waiver advice, and more. And join us on Tuesday night for our live show where we tell you who to pick up and what trades that you could make to help you win.